Tribe, Book 2, Todd Mills Mystery. Author, R.D. Zimmerman. Publisher, Scrib Pub, Minneapolis, Minnesota. Narrator, Eric Aust. Chapter 11. It was a cool, breezy night in Colorado, and Suzanne stood at the window of her darkened bedroom. Her father was out in the driveway, the hood of his car raised, his heavy body bent over the right front fender. Him in that car, his prized Cadillac, long and white and so big, since he was the only person at the congregation with a private car. There were a handful of other vehicles here on the compound, but they were all shared. She called it the Pope-mobile, but her daddy God's very own apostle on earth, sure as heck, didn't like that. She thought with a devilish grin. Among other things on the compound, there was to be no mention whatsoever of that false church and its unholiness. Standing inside and in the dark, she watched her father work in the floody lights out front, first twisting the oil filter, next measuring some fluid. She wanted to be out of there too, but he'd ordered her to stay inside in case the phone rang with news of the baby. The baby. The baby. The baby. Her father had been using those two words to shackle her to the house, not only for the last week, but also the last 13 months, ever since she'd first gotten pregnant. Eat this, don't eat that. Now rest. Suzanne, rest and pray to Jehovah for a healthy child. Well, she was sick of it. Yes, she wanted news of Ripka, but how long was she supposed to stay cooped up in here before she started bouncing off the walls? Still, without turning on the light, she dropped herself on the edge of her bed, stared up at the black ceiling. Her father had never trusted her, not really. Always keeping tabs on her, questioning her whereabouts, who she'd seen, what she'd done. Maybe if her mother were still alive, things would be different. Suzanne cursed the day her mother had died of melanoma. Instead of a nice family, it was just she and her dad, and he was like the Gestapo, always watching her, getting furious, even jealous, if she attracted too much attention. She couldn't help it if all the guys liked her. Her dad said she attracted boys like a cat in heat. Well, maybe so. She was pretty, so what? And she had nice tits, full and round, or at least that's what all the guys said. The guys, she laughed. Her dad actually thought Zeb had been the first to crawl in through her bedroom window. Oh, Daddy would be so angry about all the guys she'd known. Maybe one day when she wanted to make her father nice and mad, she'd go ahead and tell him. And then she started to cry, her round cheeks flushed red, her almondy eyes crinkled up. She wanted Zeb. She wanted Ripka with her dark curls. She wanted them both to come back and take her away too. How could Zeb have done it, gone and left her like this? Sure, both of their fathers had made them get married, but why hadn't he at least told her that he was going to run away? Didn't he know she would have fled the congregation too? It was just so incredibly boring here. She wiped the few tears from her cheeks, sat up, and glanced outside again. Her father was still out there, still monkeying with his stupid car. It doesn't make any difference, she thought. None of it does, and she stood up, left her room, crossed the hall, and entered her father's room. She didn't need to turn on the lights here, either, for she knew just where he kept it. Placed there after the government's attack on others, crossing to the far side of the bed, she opened up her bedside table, pulled open the drawer, and there lay his gun, a heavy, silvery thing. She studied it in the faint light, reached for it once, then retracted her hands. She stood quite still for a moment and realized that, no, for once she was going to do what she wanted, instead of what Daddy or God the Son or God the Father said, or the congregation. This was her decision. Or maybe it wasn't, she thought with an impish grin as she sat down on the edge of her father's bed. Sure, she was just going to put her faith to a little test and see what God had in store for her. Her hands quiet, calm. She lifted the pistol and a small box of bullets from the drawer, arranging them all on the bedspread beside her. Never keep a gun loaded, that's what her daddy always said. So she just had to find out how you open this thing. The barrel. She pushed at the couple of levers, and finally it opened, the barrel flopping to the side. She held it up toward the window, peered through the chambers, and sure enough, saw a series of holes in the dim light. Not loaded, so her daddy was a man of his words. Now for the test of faith. She opened up the small box of bullets and ran her fingertips over the smooth tips. Okay, she thought. If there was a God, if he was watching over her, then everything would be all right. It would mean that he had a plan after all. Simple. She brushed aside her hair with one hand, then selected one bullet. Just one. Suzanne studied it, rolled it between her fingers. A bullet of truth, she thought. That's what it was. No, a piercing bullet of faith. Her hands working quickly, she picked up the pistol, slipped in the bullet, closed the gun, and then spun the barrel, which rolled with a gentle clicking sound. God the Father, God the Son, and God's apostle on earth. She spun it 3 times. Next, she held the pistol up to her right temple, pressing the cool barrel right against her skin. Is there a plan? She asked aloud, her eyes peering heavenward. If so, am I a part of it? Her body rigid with tension, she pulled the trigger, which clicked with a sharp, hollow sound. Nothing else happened. However, there was no shattering explosion. Suzanne sat there on the edge of the bed, surprised, almost disappointed. She was alive, so what did that mean? She was tempted to pull the trigger again to see how much she could truly prod fate. Realizing she shouldn't press the matter, however, she stood up. She had her answer. The gun hadn't fired. She was alive, so there must be a plan for her life. She must have to live for some unknown reason. But she thought, biting her bottom lip, she did have one more question. Carrying the pistol carefully in her right hand, she left her father's bedroom, crossed the hall, and returned to her own room. With the light still off, she went up to the window. Her father was still out there, bent over that big white Cadillac, and poking around at the engine, she cracked the window and lifted the gun up to the slender opening. So, he had a plan for her, but what about her father? Crouching down, she took aim as best she could, for the only gun she'd ever fired was the BB gun at the country fair. The one and only county fair her father had allowed her to go to several years ago. She considered spinning the barrel yet again, then thought otherwise, for she'd already spun it 3 times, and certainly the fate of this household had already been decided. Just aim and squeeze. Right, that's how you're supposed to do it. She squinted, trained the barrel on her daddy, and gently pulled. To her surprise, once again, nothing happened, only a sharp click. So he had a plan for him, too. With a shrug, Suzanne closed the window and returned the gun to her father's bedside table. A Gay Mysteries audiobooks. I think it is easy to hate a label, but a face humanizes the word. So this effort is twofold. To offer comfort to those like myself that your world didn't end because you don't fit into the view of acceptable society on both sides. And in hopes of helping those with family that are LGBTQ, that it doesn't mean we are aliens from the child they once knew. Reassure them so they can maybe be supportive at the same time, being true to their values.